Morning students, today we are going to start a new lesson, that is Should Wizard Hit Mummy? It was written by John Hoyer Updike. John Hoyer Updike was an American novelist, was a poet and critic. He was born in March 18, 1932 and he was died in 2009. He is actually very famous. He was very famous. He is the one who won the Pulitzer Prize winner. Pulitzer Prize winner is something great for his book. I think Rabbit is Rich. That's a title of the book. He won the Pulitzer Award. Let us begin with the lesson. Before you read, here is a story about the world view of a little child and the difficult moral question she raises during the story session with her father. Actually, we can say that this is not only about the child's perception of life, even we can say the father's perception of life. So, the children's perception of life is always different from the grown-ups. Let us begin. In the evenings and for Saturday naps, like today's, Jack told his daughter Jo a story out of his head. In the evenings and for Saturday naps, naps means sleep, like today's, Jack told his daughter Jo. So, Jack's daughter's name is Jo. He used to create stories for her, for his daughter. Story out of his head. Out of his head means he creates, he makes stories for whom? For his daughter. This custom began when she was 2. Was itself now nearly 2 years old and his head felt empty. So, this custom began, when did he begin with this storytelling? When the child was only 2 years old. Custom means practice. The practice started when the child was only 2 years old and now it is 2 years old. Now itself now nearly 2 years old and now she completed the 4 years, isn't it? 2 years more passed. And his head felt empty because last 2 years he is narrating stories, that is he is creating stories for his daughter. Now his head is empty. Now he does not have any ideas, new ideas for the storytelling. Each new story was a slight variation of a basic tale. Slight means a little. So, each new story was a slight variation. Variation means different. Slight difference is there for the everyday storytelling. And what is about the story generally? A small creature. He used to make different stories about a small creature, usually named Roger. So, the first name will be Roger. So, how the name is to change, you see, Roger Fish. Sometimes he used to speak a story or tell a story about Roger Fish, sometimes about Roger Squirrel, Roger Chipmunk. Chipmunk, what is chipmunk? Chipmunk is the North American squirrel, is known as what? Chipmunk. Had some problem and went with it to the wise old owl. What type of stories he used to say? He used to say sometimes Roger Fish used to face some problem and or sometimes who used to face problem? Squirrel will be facing problem, or sometimes chipmunk faces some problem and they went to solve the problem to whom? To the wise old owl. Owl is the person who used to solve their problems. The owl told him to go to the wizard. So, if he can't solve the problem, then he is to direct them to meet whom? The wizard. Who is a wizard? Wizard is a magician. And the wizard performed a magic spell that solved the problem. He used to take the magic stick and perform a what? Magic spell, then the problem will be solved. Demanding in payment a number of pennies greater than the number that Roger creature had, but in the same breath directing the animal to place where the extra pennies could be found. So, he is to demand money from these animals. So, sometimes the animal does not have the money, then he is to give the animal the solution also. The animal has to go and visit a place where extra money could be found. So, that way also who used to help them? The wizard used to help them. Then Roger was so happy, he played many games with other creatures and went home to his mother just in time to hear the train whistle that brought his daddy home from Boston. Then Roger was so happy that played many games with creatures. What the Roger used to do, he used to play with other animals and went home to his mother just in time to hear the train whistle that brought his daughter. When the Roger used to hear the name or the sound of the train, he used to go back home because will be coming back in the train? The father will come back. From where? From Boston. Jack described their supper and the story was over. The father used to say, Jack told about the Roger's supper and the story will be over. Working his way through this scheme means plan, was especially fatiguing on Saturday because Joe never fell asleep in naps anymore, and knowing this made the rite seem futile. The rite here means customary observances. Futile means useless because now she is grown up, no, the Joe is grown up, she doesn't sleep so fast. So now who becomes very tired? Jack becomes very tired telling the story and he becomes very tired. I'll once again say the Roger was so happy he played the Roger. The animal he selected is Roger. What he used to do? He used to play games with the other animals. Then he goes back to home when he hears the sound of the train because who comes at that time? His father comes at that time, isn't it? And then the Jack used to they explain to about their supper. Whose supper? Roger and family supper. And then the story will be over. In this way, he is actually especially very tiring for Jack because nowadays Joan doesn't sleep very fast. The little girl, not so little anymore, the bumps her feet made under the covers were halfway down the bed. Bumps her feet means, bumps means bounces. Her feet made under the covers were halfway down the bed. She was about to come out of the bed. Their big double bed that they let her be in for naps, and when she was sick, had at last arranged herself, and from the way her fat face deep in pillow shone in the sunlight sifting through the drawn shades, it did not seem fantastic that some magic would occur and she would take her nap like an infant of 2. Her brother Bobby was 2 and already asleep with his bottle. Jack asked, who shall the story be about today? So generally each day what type of story he used to say? The story will be begin with the name Roger. So generally the Roger used to play with the friends, and when he hears the sound of the train he goes back home. Then the Jack tells about their supper and then he stops generally, isn't it? But nowadays Joe doesn't want to sleep so early. What she used to do? She used to try to come out of the the little girl, that is the Joe. Inside the bracket you can see not so little anymore. She is grown up now because last 2 years who is continuing with the storytelling? Jack continued with the storytelling. Now she completed 4 years. No more little anymore. The bumps her feet made under the covers where he used to cover her up with a bed sheet, but she used to come out of the bed. What type of bed they are sleeping? Big double bed that they let her be in for naps, and when she was sick, had at last arranged herself. The little girl had at last arranged herself, and from the way her fat face deep in the pillow shone in the sunlight sifting through the drawn shades. What is shifting means? Scattered. It did not seem fantastic that some magic could occur. So who is actually really wishes to whom to sleep? Joe to sleep. Jack really wanted Joe to sleep very fast. Like whom? Like an infant of 2, because he is very tired of narrating the stories. Her brother, Joe had a brother also. What was the name of the brother? Bobby was 2 and already asleep with his bottle. He used to take milk in the bottle and he already slept. Jack asked, who shall the story be about today? So the story begins with the Jack's question. What was the Jack's question? About whom do you want to hear the story today? Roger. Joe squeezed her eyes shut and smiled to thinking she was thinking. Her eyes opened and her mother's blue skunk, she said firmly. So what type of eyes Joe had? Like her mother. What color of eyes she had? The blue color eyes. And she squeezed her eyes shut. She tried to close her eyes and What else did she do? She said that she wanted to hear whose story? The skunk story. That's what she said. Roger's skunk story she wanted to hear. She said very firmly, a new animal, they must talk about skunks at nursery school. Having a fresh hero momentarily stirred Jack to create enthusiasm. So actually the child must have heard about the name of the animal skunk from the nursery school. So who started creating a story with a lot of enthusiasm? Jack started creating new story with a lot of enthusiasm. All right, he said. Once upon a time, in the deep dark woods, there was a tiny little creature by the name of Roger Skunk, and he smelled very bad. So who started telling the stories? Jack started telling the stories. To whom did he start the stories? To his daughter named Jo. You have to be very careful while reading this text, because in between the story is also narrated and in between the child's conversation also comes. So you have to be very careful. Yes, Jo said. So when the father began with the story, who is replying yes? Jo replied yes. He smelled so bad. The father said that the animal called Roger Skunk smelled very badly, so bad that none of the other little woodland creatures would play with him. So no, even in the forest, no other animal wanted to play with whom? Play with Roger Skunk. Joe looked at him solemnly. Solemnly means very seriously. She hadn't foreseen this. Foreseen means seen before. Seen before this. Whenever he would go out to play, Jack said, continued with zest, remembering certain humiliations of his own childhood. So Jack must have created this story, must be remembering about his own humiliations. He had experiences when he was a small child. Who had experiences? Jack. Maybe because of that he created such type of stories. Jack continued with remembering certain humiliations of his own childhood. All the other tiny animals would cry, "Oh, here comes Roger's stinky skunk," and they would run away, and Roger Skunk would stand there all alone, and two little round tears would fall from his eyes. So he is continuing with the stories. He said that whenever the Roger Skunk used to go to play with the other animals, they used to call him as what? Roger's stinky skunk, because of his bad smell, and they used to run away from him. Then skunk would then he used to stand alone. The Roger Skunk used to stand alone, and he used to be he used to be crying while standing alone there. The corners of Joe's mouth dropped down, and her lower lip bent forward as he traced with a forefinger along the side of her nose the course of one of Roger Skunk's tears. The child was so completely involved in the story. Who also started crying? Joe also started crying. See, just see, the corners of Joe's mouth drooped down. Drooped down means hung down, and her lower lips bent forward. When the child start crying, the lower lip, how it used to be formed, and traced with forefinger, and he traced, the father, the judge traced what? A little tear on whose eyes, from whose eyes? From the Joe's eyes, because Joe started crying when she heard that Roger Skunk was crying. Clear? And won't he see the owl? She asked in a high and faintly roughened voice. I still remember when we watch movies, isn't it? In the very sad stories are there, then people used to cry. I had seen so many of them crying in the theater itself. Isn't it? The same way the child was hearing the story and she started crying. And she started, and in the beginning itself I told you, whenever the Roger animals, and it can be fish, it can be any animal, faces some problem in the story created by Joe, where do they go? They used to go and meet the owl first. If the owl cannot solve it, then they used to go and meet the wizard, isn't it? So that who knew it? The Joe knew it. That's why she asked her father, didn't the skunk visit the owl? Isn't it? Won't he see the owl? She asked in a high and faintly roughened voice. Sitting on the bed beside her, Jack felt the covers tug as her legs switched tensely. The covers tug. Tug means pull hard. As her legs switched tensely, he was pleased with this moment. He was telling her something true, something she must know, and had no wish to hurry on. Actually, who was very happy because the father wanted to teach the child through this story something new. Actually, he wanted his child should understand this situation. That's why he began with this type of story. So, something she must know and had no wish to hurry on. He doesn't want to hurry the story. But downstairs a chair scrapped. Then these father and the daughter, both of them were sitting in the first floor. Then he heard a sound from where? From the downstairs. And he realized he must get down to help Clara paint the living room woodwork. Then when he heard the sound coming from the ground floor, he remembered that he is supposed to go and help his wife Clara. What was Clara doing? She was painting the woodwork, isn't it? The furniture. Well, he walked along very sadly and came to a very big tree. Now, who is continuing with the story? John is continuing with the story. The skunk walked along very sadly and came to a big tree, and in the tiptoe of the tree, tip top means on the top of the tree, was an enormous wise old owl. Enormous means very big, wise old owl. So, I hope you understood, that is, the Roger skunk was very unhappy because no other animal was ready to play with him. So, he approached whom? He approached the owl. So, what type of owl? It was a very big, wise, old owl. So, the child is saying the Joe. Yes, good, good. So, Joe is very happy because Roger skunk reached at whose place? At the owl's place. Mr. Owl, Roger skunk said, all the other little animals run away from me because I smell so bad. When the skunk reached the owl, he said that nobody is playing with him. So, you do, the owl said, very, very bad. So, owl also said, yes, it is true, you are smelling very bad. What can I do? Roger skunk said, and he cried very hard. Roger skunk said, what can I do? I am smelling very bad. So, and he started crying very badly. The wizard, Joe shouted. Who is interfering the story? The Joe is interfering the story. Because in the last stories, always Jack used to say what? If the problem is not solved by the owl, then the animals used to report to the wizard, isn't it? So, who knew about it? The Joe knew about it. That's why he started directing the wizard. Joe shouted and sat right up, and the little golden book spilled from the bed. Spilled means fell from the bed. Now, Joe, Daddy is telling the story. Do you want to tell Daddy the story? So, who was angry now? The Jack was angry. So, what did he say that? Joe, who is telling the story? I am telling the story. Do you want to tell the story to the daddy? That's what he asked. So, the Joe replied very fast, no, you me, means please you tell the story to me. Then lie down and be sleepy. You don't have to get up in the bed. You please lie down and try to be sleepy. Her head relapsed. Relapsed means sank again onto the pillow, and she said, out of your head, from your head, out of your head, means please start telling the story. Well, now who is continuing with the story? The Jack is continuing with the story. Well, the owl thought and thought. At last he said, why don't you go to see the wizard? So, the owl started thinking and the problem of the whom? Roger skunk, and he directed the Roger skunk to whom? To the wizard. Then again Joe is speaking, Daddy. Then Jack asked, what? Are magic spells real? മന്ത്രവാദമൊക്കെ യാഥാർത്ഥ്യമാണോ എന്നാണ് who is asking? Joe is asking. This was a new phase just this last month, a reality phase. When he told her spiders eat bugs, she turned to her mother and asked, do they really? Actually, he is recollecting when Jack told the stories, in that story, the spiders used to eat bugs. So what did she do? The Joe went and asked her mother, is it a true thing whether father is narrating? And when Claret told her God was in the sky and all around them, she turned her father and insisted with a sly yet eager smile, is he really? Is he really? So again interference is there always. Joe always interferes while who is speaking telling the story? Jack is telling the story. So sly means clever. Insistent means demanded. So what she wanted to confirm from the Jack, Joe wanted to confirm from Jack that is it really who exists? The wizards are there, isn't it? So they are real in stories. Jack answered curtly. Curtly means briefly. Curtly means briefly. So when the Joe asked whether really the wizards are there, so what did the Jack say? Jack said that they are real in stories. She had made him miss a beat in the narrative. The owl said, go through the dark woods, under the apple trees, into the swamp, over the creek. This is again continuing with the story. She had made him miss a beat in the narrative. That means what? Who made him miss? The Joe made Jack to miss a beat in the narrative. The flow is interrupted by whose interference? By the interference of the child. Understood? Jack is telling the story, in between who is clarifying the doubts? Joe is clarifying the doubts. So the flow is not there. The flow is interrupted. Clear? The owl said, now again Jack continued with the story. The owl said, go through the dark woods. Who is directing? The owl is directing the Roger Skunk to meet the wizard. The owl said, go through the dark woods, under the apple trees, into the swamp. Swamp is a marshy land. Over the creek. Over the creek. Creek is a little river. So then in between when the Roger Skunk complained the owl about his bad smell, the owl said that you have to, the Roger Skunk had to meet the wizard, and the owl is giving the directions, the way to whose house? To the wizard's house. Now again the doubt is arised by whom? Aroused by this girl, that is Joe. Joe is asking her father, what is a creek? Creek means what? A little river over the creek, and there will be the wizard's house. So Jack is clearing the doubt of Joe. He said that creek means it is a river. Then he continues with the story. You don't get confused in between whose interruptions are there. Joe's interruptions are there. Over the creek, and there will be the wizard's house, and that is the way Roger Skunk went. And pretty soon he came to a little white house, and he rapped on the door. Rapped means knocked on the door. So as directed by the owl, who reached the wizard's house, the Roger Skunk reached the wizard's house, and who knocked the door? The Roger Skunk knocked the door. Jack rapped on the windowsill. So just to show the child, Jack also rapped. The rap means knock the windowsill. Sill is a narrow shelf at the base of the window. And under the covers of Joe's tall figure, clenched. Clenched means lost in an infantile thrill. Infantile means baby. Thrill means excitement. So under the bed, who was sleeping under the bed sheet? Who is there? The Joe is there. So who is having the excitement? The child is having the excitement. Which child is mentioned here? Joe is mentioned here. Clear? And then a tiny little old man came out. So after knocking, who was standing outside? Roger Skunk is waiting outside. A little old man came out from the house with a long white beard and a pointed blue hat and said, so he came out and he just said, what is? See what is nullana? Our spelling is Old English. That is what is. Watcher want. Watcher want means what do you want? You smell awful. Awful means terrible. Oh, you smell awful. Even who said that you are smelling awful? The wizard also told the Roger Skunk. The wizard's voice was one of Jack's own favorite effects. He did it by scrunching up his face and somehow winning through his eyes, which felt for the interval roomy. Actually, what Jack did was, he only narrating the story. So, he used to give a lot of voice modulation while narrating the story. Even when he said the dialogue of this wizard, he changed the sound. He understood. Who changed the sound? The Jack changed the sound. He did it by scrunching. Scrunching means crushing up his face. Somehow winning. Winning means crying or weeping through his eyes, which fell for the interval roomy. Roomy is romantic. Romantic. He felt which fell for the romantic is actually വാദം എന്ന് പറയും. നമ്മൾ റൊമാൻറ്റിക് ഫീവർ എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ വാദം. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു അസുഖമുള്ള ആൾ സംസാരിക്കുന്ന പോലെ ഒരു മോഡുലേഷനിലാണ്. ഹൂ സ്പോക്ക്? Jack spoke. He felt being an old man suited him. As he felt being an old man suited. Suited means fitted. Just like an old man, how he speaks. The same way was imitated by whom? By Jack. For what purpose did he do that? He just wanted to create a lot of enthusiasm in whom? In Joe. That's why Jack changed the voice and spoke like a wizard here. I know it, Roger Skunk said, and all the little animals run away from me. The enormous wise owl said you could help me. So, when the wizard told him, you are smelling very badly, then Roger Skunk agreed, and he said that in order to change the smell, the old owl asked me to meet who? Meet the wizard. Well, maybe. Come on in. Don't get too close. Now, inside Joe, there were all these magic things all jumbled together in a big dusty heap, because the wizard did not have any cleaning lady. So, who asked the Roger Skunk to get inside the house? The wizard. So, don't get too close. Now, inside Joe, now Jack is saying, inside Joe, wizard's house, it was not so clean because he doesn't have a cleaning lady. So, then another doubt for the Joe. Why Papa, this wizard doesn't have a cleaning lady? Why? Because he was a wizard and a very old man. So, the reply also given by Jack. Will he die? So, then the next doubt Joe raised was, will the wizards die? No, wizards don't die. Well, he rummaged. Rummage means searched around carelessly. Searched around carelessly and found an old stick. Now, who started continuing with the story? Jack started continuing with the story. The wizard searched around, found an old stick called a magic wand. What was that stick called? Magic wand. Wand means stick. And asked the Roger Skunk what he wanted to smell like. Then the wizard asked the Roger Skunk which smell he wanted. Roger thought and said roses. He thought and he had given, I want the smell of the roses. Yes, good. Joe said smugly. Smugly means satisfied. Jack fixed up with a trance. Trance means thinking, forgetting everything around you. Or hypnotism madriyaka. Understood? And like gaze. Trance like gaze, and chanted in the wizard's elderly irritable voice. Irritable means that causes irritation. Jack fixed her with a trance. With a trance means thinking, he was just fixed her and he started chanting. Chanting means spelled out. The wizard's elderly irritable voice. What type of voice the wizard had? The irritable voice that causes irritation. And he started telling the mandram. എന്തൊക്കെയാ പറഞ്ഞു നോക്കൂ? Abra kadre bi. So, it is very difficult to read the slogan. Who recited? That wizard recited. The wizard recited a slogan in order to make whom smell like roses? Roger Skunk smell like roses. Today's class is over. I hope you understood. If you have any doubts, you please contact me. Another thing I just wanted to tell you, for the ASL, be on time. Clear? Thank you.